to do a little response video here, one of a personal nature. Some people have been asking me lately why I'm so much harder on the right than I am on the left in regards to American politics. And, this is interesting because, from my perspective, coming out of the right-wing camp and still considering myself more, on the right side of the aisle, if I were to take sort of that left and right dichotomy kind of a perspective, it's one for me where the discussion is still valid, where there is still a point to be debated. It's where I find sort of the most interest in that respect, where I'm trying to lead my friends on the right down a path that is more righteous than where they've been on, the way they've continued to fall, fail, and flounder, as we've seen America and American politics really go to a dead end in that respect in a lot of different ways, particularly on the political right. Listen, I've said it before and I'll say it again. The left in America, the Democratic Party, the progressives, all the crazy stuff we see in our society, they are the satanic left. I've said that. I've called them the satanic left. There's actually not a greater insult that I could ever throw at any other ideological movement than to relate them to satanic principles, right? I mean, they support, endorse, and celebrate every form of moral degradation that we've ever understood in regards to sacred tradition, the 2,000-year analogy of the faith, and every basic common sense of reason, rationale, logic, whatever you want to call it. I've never said that about the right. I've never addressed the right that way. In fact, I've given the right the time to address their concerns and deal with issues from their perspective. Because I criticize the right doesn't mean I let the left off the hook. Again, there's not a greater insult I could throw at the left than say they're satanic. Now, why do I go after the right? Because that's where I believe the discussion is. As far as the left side of the aisle, how do you debate lunatics? How do you debate lunatics? That's my question. Listen, I was in the right-wing camp. I went through the abortion issue. I went through the rise of government. I went through secular government arguments. I went through contraception. I went through all the evils that the left presents to society. I've been through it all. And I've come to the conclusion, you don't debate lunatics anymore. You simply take over civilization. That's what you do. And you infuse your values, right? But this is where the right makes a big mistake, where they want to play, the gentleman's game and fight in the battle arena of ideas. I'm not interested in fighting in the battle arena of ideas. You don't debate lunatics. You don't debate those that are demonically inspired, because you can't come to reason with them. You can't be logical with people that are lunatics, where the only invested interest they have is to have their sins justified at every turn. This is why, to me, there is no left and right debate. The left is far gone. There's nothing we can do to ever coexist with the left. They want their own civilization. They want their own society. Let them have it. But like I keep saying, why do we Catholics, why have we never been allowed to have our own civilization, to govern our own lives, our own families? And get this, it was the classical liberals that took that away from us. It wasn't the left. It wasn't the progressives. It was the classical liberals. And yet I'm supposed to debate a bunch of lunatics because I've been put on this playing field that I never chose to fight on? I don't care to debate lunatics anymore. You guys on the right are losing precisely because you guys still believe you can manage the decline of civilization. The debate is not on left or right anymore. That debate is over. That debate, the left has won. The question is, what does the right do at this point in time? Does it continue to try and govern civilization from a principle of leftist politics in order to try and bring about some type of conservative bastion back to our civilization, when in fact all those principles have ever done, all classical liberal principles have ever done, is bring the world, the nation, the country, the entire globe to some type of leftist utopia? And you guys want to sit here and criticize me for that? Are you kidding me right now? At what point are you guys going to see the very problems you unleashed? That you've given the power to your leftist progressive siblings, and you do that on a daily basis. I understand we have a governing body of politics, but that battle is being lost daily by the right in America. There's not a darn thing you guys have done to turn the trajectory of this country or this civilization around. And the more you go out there on Facebook or social media and complain about the left, the more they win, the more they put a boot up your rear end. Right? Remember the old song, we're Americans, and we'll put a boot in your ass. Listen, the only ones that have a boot in their ass is the political right in America. They had an election stolen, or they claim they had an election stolen, and yet nothing they're willing to do to even stand up for that, because they have a conundrum, and that is a political system that the classical liberals gave us. The progressives figured out how to use that political system in order to undermine the classical liberals, and now they're caught in this trap, a trap that they can't get out of. A trap where democracy and republicanism and Enlightenment principles have all been turned on its head on everybody and the entire world, and the right has no answer other than let's go out there and vote harder. Let's go out and fight in the battle arena of ideas. A battle arena of ideas which they've been losing now for 250 years, ironically enough. Right? You undermine Catholic civilization because you got these grandiose ideas, man's grandiose ideas. Ask a conservative why they believe the Enlightenment ideas are superior to the old Catholic world. Well, the founders were the smartest men of their time. Were they the smartest men of their time? Really? Really? You still believe that? We've been going to the far left since the founding of America and really all of Western civilization. I mean, this goes beyond just America. And yet there's no answer to regulate back to sanity anymore. We got a nation and a globe that's been encompassed by a dark satanic cloud, and you guys want to do business as usual? What? Listen to Tucker Carlson? Oh, Tucker's going to stick it to them tonight, right? Oh, did you listen to Tucker? Tucker's the man. Tucker's going to let them know. Tucker is my cheerleader. Tucker makes me feel better. Listen, guys, in all seriousness here, I understand the desperation on the right. We have to govern our civilization. I really do. And understanding that, we have to take everything into account. The problem that we face, though, is a problem of principle. We've sold out the faith. We've separated logic, reason from faith. And by infusing this fake abstract Christianity that America was founded upon, it's left a void in the daily cultural, political affairs of our country and of our civilization, for that matter. Until we get these principles right, there's no going back. Or should I say, really, there's no going forward at this point in time. It's why the left always wins. You guys have to understand here where the mistakes came in the past. To simply say, well, it's all the fault of our progressive siblings from a right-wing perspective is not an answer anymore. It simply isn't. Because it was the classical liberal thinkers and the Enlightenment that put in motion the very principles that the far left is using against you now to take down everything you believe. Let's be honest here for a second, okay? The entire battle of Western civilization, from the beginning of time, going all the way back to the garden with Adam and Eve, was the struggle against sin. The very first sin, of course, being the sin of pride. And it is that pride that man has struggled with through every generation. And it's been the battle against sin and man trying to overcome sin. The problem here is that as man has tried to overcome sin, they've tried to do a workaround salvation history, right? What they've tried to say is, well, we got a natural world and a supernatural world, and we have to separate these, particularly as man has become enamored with his sins. And we see this in various ways throughout salvation history, where mankind is trying to do a workaround in regards to their fallen human nature. Okay, God, I will follow you, but these are my dictates. I'm going to determine sort of this idea of how salvation is attained in the afterlife while I do what I want to do here, while I pursue my own individual ambitions here, right? The covenant theology of many conservatives, which is de facto a rebellion in itself. And it's like I said before, once you go down the path of rebellion, once you say to God, no, I'm not going to do the way you dictated, I'm going to renegotiate the terms of condition without any really, justification without any kind of divine revelation where God is actually renegotiating the covenant itself, which of course you guys have no proof for, you got a problem because now it's man's idea. This is why I rail against guys like Beck who talk about covenant theology. It's why I rail against many of the political right who get caught up in this abstract religion. Everything that we're seeing in our political system comes downstream from the culture, the family, and originally from the faith. If we don't get the faith and the true belief in God, true principles in God, our Lord, our Savior, true principles that one time kept the West together, Catholic principles, the principles of the church, Holy Mother helped us control our passions. And it's been since that time, since that rebellion, that mankind has lost not only his ability to control his fallen nature, but even his ability to reason. When you deal with people on the left, they don't reason anymore. They're simply following naturalistic impulses. They've been paganized. This is what we're dealing here. This is why even talking to them doesn't even make sense anymore at this point in time. Let them govern themselves and let us govern ourselves. Let's reestablish. But we can't do a reestablishment of our own civilization with our own principles if we don't get our principles, right? If we simply go down the path of the Enlightenment again, this will happen all over again. This hasn't happened by accident. It's not just a random occurrence that everybody just went crazy at some point in time. This is the rejection and the rebellion against God. This has been the rebellion against God now for 500 years. I know conservatives don't want to go back to that. I know we got pluralism in America. I know everybody's picked and choose their own personal religion based on the concepts of religious liberty. But don't you see it? Don't you see it? If those principles are at the core root of what is wrong with America, how can you hold on to those, right? If you decided, for example, to adopt a post-Enlightenment religious liberty sort of faith or religion, like Mormonism, for example, how can you ever see whatever went wrong? You've adopted an American principle, an Enlightenment principle that has shaped you up for disaster. And now you can't even go back and acknowledge, well, wait a minute, this is the mistake that was made. Because the premise that you began with was Enlightenment principles, when in fact we have a history, an analogy of the faith that goes back for thousands of years in a culture that was much healthier, despite the propaganda we heard about the old world, which ironically enough, it's a propaganda now that the progressives are using against the conservatives, ironically enough, right? Go 100, 200 years down the line. What are conservatives? Anybody with an R next to their name, anybody who votes Republican, they will be considered a bigot, a sexist, a homophobe, because that's how propaganda works, right? I've told you before, the propaganda the left uses today to malign their political opponents is the same propaganda the classical liberal thinkers used against the old world. That's why I say reconsider your entire paradigm, the perspective by which you've been taught, because a lot of it has been historical revisionism in order to form you, control you, and ultimately brainwash you into this post-Enlightenment thinking to where anybody that came before the Enlightenment is totally and instantly discredited, right? What a beautiful way to do some brainwashing for that matter. And yet, we all have ancestors that go back. We all have ancestors that not only saw the vision, not only did they come before the brainwashing of the Enlightenment and the Protestant Reformation, they were much healthier members of society. We all look back at the reverence of the past because of the lunacy we see today, right? You look at our parents' generation, our grandparents' generation, our great-great-great-grandparents' generation, and yet when we look back, even just as simple as our own genealogical line, look back at our ancestors, a much healthier culture, much healthier family lines. Granted, there's always exceptions, right? There's always an a-hole in the past, right, that didn't do it right. But that is the exception rather than the rule. Most of our ancestral lines, our ancestors, they fought, they died, they sweated, they shed blood to give us the faith, and we willy-nilly gave up that faith. And that sort of, that balance, that force of good, that force of true faith, that kept true principles in place in order to give us a healthier culture. And yet, as we've gone down these Enlightenment principles of rebellion, starting with the classical liberals, look at the state of our society. It's collapsed. It's collapsed. Tell me where the debate is. What do I tell a person that is demonically possessed on the left? What do I tell them? When somebody says to you, abortion is a woman's choice, that's lunacy. If you can't even see the basic human dignity behind slaughtering a child in the womb, how do you convince that person? You may need an exorcism. You may need some supernatural means to help that person. And guess what? Classical liberal politics isn't prepared to deal with that, right? Because you've kicked out the natural, or should I say, you've kicked out the supernatural from the natural. You have a governing body of politics where supernatural means now are infecting your politics, but the tools and the necessary principles needed in order to combat those supernatural forces of darkness, you have just thrown away to the side. You've said all we need is rationalism. All we need is logic and reason, and yet look at the world around you. If you ever get to write a script of Satan taking over a civilization, could you have written a better one than the life that we're living today? And I say this as a man who's almost 50 years old, who's watched civilization collapse in my lifetime alone. The radical difference of customs and morals and mores and cultural beliefs has changed so radically in just my lifetime alone. It's insane. Yet I can trace back my ancestral roots for hundreds of years, and morality stayed pretty much intact. Sure, there's always movements. Cultures always shift in some capacity. But never have we seen this. Tell me how we're supposed to win this battle, conservatives. Tell me. Go to the polls? Vote harder? Is that the answer you have? Watch Tucker every night? Go to Powerline Blog or Hot Air or whatever it is you got to do just so they get you pumped up to go vote even harder? What is the answer here? The debate is not a left or right debate anymore. The left, they're lunatics. It's a right and right debate where we go as decent human beings, decent people. And this is what I say. I consider my friends on the right friends. I consider them decent human beings. I just consider their ideas flawed. We need to correct those flawed ideas. The church built the West. The church gave us the governing body of laws. It gave us all of our moral, philosophical principles of human dignity. It built the universities. It gave us the first industrial revolutions of sorts. And as things advance, I know you guys are all into this money, materialism stuff, right? Fine. But I would suggest that your sort of emphasis on that, with de-emphasizing the supernatural, has distorted civilization as well, too. The church always understood there is a balance between the natural state of man and the supernatural state. And once you gravitate too hard to one side, it distorts the other. And what has happened? A great apostasy. You guys abandoned true religion. You guys abandoned true faith. And now we're a society that simply focuses on the natural, materialism. And what have the progressives done over all these years? What have the Marxists done? They have completely focused on the material aspects of the world while simply throwing away all true faith and true religion. But see, you can't just blame the left for that. They simply went out and followed the principles of the classical liberals. Classical liberals that never took religion seriously, right? Religious liberty. Pick and choose your own moral code. Oh, by the way, we're a pluralistic society, right? We can't really, force people to believe anything or everybody in this pluralistic society has a choice to pick and choose the values they want. And the left, as I said before, is calling your bluff on that. If you don't even believe in the one true God that is revealed by sacred tradition, and you're not even willing to go so far as to even put the name of your God in your constitution, then why believe in God at all? Let's throw it all out with the bathwater while we're at it, right? You see what the classical liberals have unleashed until these disorders are fixed on the political right. There's no going back. There's no election going to save America. All right? They're all coming for us. To be honest with you, all of us, whether we're integralists or monarchists or Republicans or Democrats, they're coming after all of us at this point in history because ultimately it's a battle of good and evil. It is a battle between Christ our King and Satan.
And we have to choose whose side we're on. There is no middle ground. There is no abstract God. Either God is real or God is not real. And then we're at the mercy of man's fallen nature. And this is exactly how the left has been defeating the right now for centuries. You understand where we're at here? I don't need to criticize the left. They're lunatics. Please understand that. This is Frank signing off. Good night, everybody.